Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Martial Arts After Dark, where we will be discussing martial arts and probably other subject areas along the same lines, things like boxing, maybe even some social issues. But for this fine night, we're going to be talking about stances, what they are, what they come from, a little bit more understanding about them, and why they are so integral to understanding distance properly, what they shouldn't be, and what they should be. Okay? So that's going to be our agenda. First thing is, what exactly is a stance? And this changes. If you look at the concept of a stance and you go into classical Japanese arts and some of the Gendai arts, you will learn of the term kamae, okay? And a kamae refers to a position, okay? A way of orienting the body. However, when you talk about kamae, it's a little bit more all inclusive. And it's supposed to represent not only a physical posture, but in addition to a physical posture, your intent, okay? Bringing all the elements of your being into your positioning. So, obviously, that's changed over time. And there are reasons for that. Stances, just like forms, as we're going to learn when we discuss forms, they have other purposes that people aren't aware of. Stances help someone establish a particular art. All right, stances can be looked as sort of trademarks for that particular understanding, and part of that again leads us right back into this whole nexus of things that we need to pull out and unpack, because when you take and you work with a physical stance, okay, and you assign it certain characteristics, one of the things that is missed is that really what a stance is, it's supposed to be a snapshot in some respects, okay? So showing somebody a stance is like taking a series of movements and freezing it for one particular moment of clarity, okay? Anyway, with that being said, I want to talk about how I want to use the term. I want to use the term kamae. And a kamae is a physical posture that represents not only the physical elements, okay, but also your psychological profile at the time. It represents your intent, okay, and it represents how you connect to what you're doing in the overall environment, okay? The reasons for this are many. Among them, a stance is also sort of like a physical mudra, a mudra being a particular finger posture, okay? And your stance, in a way, has a similar function. When you use a mudra, you call upon the forces around you to act in accord, okay? And when you use a kamae, it's the same thing. You're assuming a position with a lot of different symbolic, occult, obvious meanings, but you're trying to channel that which is around you into what you're doing, okay? And the philosophy of this has to do with an understanding of karma and dharma, in that your actions as they are, okay, and as they are in reference to you, if they are just, okay, and if you sort of let the earth bear witness to them being just with your physical posture of a sort and asking for that judgment, okay, you then bring in the divine sense of justice inherent in those ideas, okay? It gives you an advantage. Obviously, you don't win every time because of that automatically, or the world would be a lot different. But it brings everything together to a point where you represent and you act as a kind of a lightning rod for those energies. Now, let's get into some more technical aspects, but I want you to remember this definition that I'm using because I do not use stances. I use kamais, okay? Everything that I do is embodied psychologically and emotionally as well as physically when I'm using my martial arts. And it's a good habit to get into. You'll understand that because when you fight and you're trying to prevent somebody, for example, with a very strong body position, you better be there in mind as well as in body. Otherwise, you won't be very effective. So, stances are really a part of distancing, okay? And they reflect that in their capabilities. Now, on a very fundamental level, I'll show you what this means, okay? I'm trying to get into the light here. Okay. If I am... This doesn't look so good. Hang on. Let's do this. Okay. Here we go. If I am at a distance of less than 3 feet from you and I want to hit you, okay? And I take a stance like this, it's not very effective because I'm only able to hit you with one hand from that distance, okay? I have to do some sort of an intricate movement to bring my other hand into play, all right? So many times you might see a more aggressive body position like this, or like this, okay? Or even like this. These are all examples of things where you want to bring both of your hands into play because if you're trying to hit the person, you want to use your weapons. You don't want to put one in back of the other. This was questioned in boxing as early as the 1800s when trainers were talking about why boxers' strong hand is here and the weak hand is in front. Simply being the reason for that question is this hand is what you're going to be hitting more with. In the old days, it was called the lead. It was done more like this, and then later the jab with pronation, okay? Either case, until people start to square up in classical boxing, where we see that with Jack Dempsey representing a lot of those ideals, people thought about it before, but when you square up, and when fighters square up, you will notice that things like the peekaboo and these other positions, they generally allow the fighter to access both his hands in a combat situation, or I shouldn't say in a sport fighting situation. Okay? Now, as you go outwards with your body positioning, things change, okay? Now, when you want to create distance, perhaps, you can elongate your physical posture, okay? And you see kamais that are more reflective of that, okay? So as I come from here and I extend, okay, I have more distance, but I don't really necessarily have to be totally extended at this distance, okay? And we're going to get into the reasons for that. I can extend that even further. If now we're a good 6 feet apart or more, I can even extend, pretend I'm at that distance, even more, okay? Now I'm really, you can't see my legs, but I'm just more extended. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what my legs are doing, okay? Now I can be here, okay? Which is reflective of that distance, okay? Now, what is the understanding of this? And how is that used when we consider distancing? All right, we're going to go do one more part to this so we keep these short, okay? Hang tight.